Welcome to the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. This podcast is dedicated to helping book lovers discover new authors. Like all the best bookshops, this podcast is filled with all kinds of books and all kinds of authors. So tune in, browse around, find a new author, and discover a new favorite book at the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. I'm Stacey Horan, author, book lover, and host of the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. This is episode number 209. For more information about this or any of our episodes, go to my website, staceyhoran.com. If you enjoy the podcast, leave us a review, like us on social media, and share us with your friends, family, and fellow readers. In today's episode of the Bookshop at the End of the Internet, I'm chatting with author Allie Slocum about her Character Club series for young readers. Allie Slocum has always been a writer. Back in the third grade, she formed a writing club that met during recess, but only Allie and her best friend showed up to that first meeting. By the second day, Allie was its sole remaining member. But back then, she began to write a series of stories that would become the spark for her current Character Club series. Each book features a different kid who participates in an after-school club, with each installment focusing on the children's journeys as they learn various life skills, such as compassion and forgiveness, dealing with loneliness, respecting yourself and others, and accepting the consequences of lying. Allie's goal is to write books about regular kids leading regular lives, going through regular things that kids go through. In this episode, I'll chat with Allie about her writing journey, how her own life struggles make their way into her books, and her plans for the rest of the series and the other members of the Character Club, as well as a few other things coming up. Allie Slocum, I want to thank you very much for joining me today on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I absolutely love the name of your podcast. It's so cute.
Thanks. Yes, my husband gets full credit for that.
Okay.
He came up with the name. But what we're going to do today is talk about your series, the Character Club series. What I'd like to do is have you introduce us to the series as a whole, kind of give us an overview. And then I'd like to talk about the individual books for the series. So if you can kind of give us an overview, and in particular, I'm curious, what made you start writing it?
Great question. So back when I was in third grade, I wanted to be an author. And so I invited all my friends to come be a part of my writers club at recess. And we were going to sit and we were going to write books. And we would take pieces of copy or paper and fold them in half and then in half again and then staple them. And we would make our books. And the first day it was me and my best friend, and that's all who came. But we weren't discouraged. We wrote our little book series, and then I went home super excited, wrote some more. The next day I went to meet her at our spot, and it was just me. My writers club died on the second day. But my series was called the Love Is series. And so we had Love is Love, Love is Me, Love is Marriage. I mean, real creative for an 8-year-old there. But I'd like to think that my titles have a little bit more creativity now. So fast forward, now we have Jeannie Blair, author extraordinaire, Liar, Liar, Ethan McGuire, Rachel Landon, Feeling Abandoned, and Peter O'Toole, Bugged and Bullied, which is my personal favorite. And so the series actually came from a character club that I taught in my house when my daughters were in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. And so I had always wanted to write a series, but I'd gotten away from writing when in high school, my teacher started giving me that red pen treatment on my writings, and it just got hard. And so I decided to become a teacher, and I taught writing, and it was hard to teach, and I didn't like giving feedback to kids because it hurt, because I remembered how it hurt me. And so writing wasn't as much fun to teach. But then when I had my daughters, I stayed home with them for several years and realized after teaching this character club that there was a series there. Like each week we talked about a different character virtue. We had compassion, integrity, respect, forgiveness. And one day after club, as these girls were getting ready to go into middle school, I was looking at all the posters for each week and the different virtues we covered and realized, oh my goodness, there's a book series here. I could write about a different kid in the character club going through their own specific journey towards whichever virtue I wanted the book to be about. And once I realized that, I'm like, oh my goodness, there's a series here. And so the first book was actually written as kind of a graduation gift for those girls as they went off to middle school to help them know, like to help them remember the things that we had talked about and learned. And so it was kind of originally just a labor of love and a gift to them, but then it just kept going. And so this series has been born.
Very
That
nice.
was a long answer for your question.
No, that's good. That's good. Well, let's work through some examples. So maybe let's start with that very first one you wrote. Can you introduce us to the character in the club and what her journey is about in that book?
Absolutely. So Jeannie Blair is a little bit of me because she wants desperately to be an author. And that's how I was when I was her age, just really wanted desperately to be an author. And there's a contest at her school. And so she wants to win it so she can be published because the winner gets to be in like an anthology of of stories that will be published by their school district. And so she's wanting to win this contest. And so she's writing and taking notes on people. But the thing is, she's embellishing things she sees because she doesn't feel like real life is interesting enough. So she sees a boy scratching his nose and she says that he was picking his nose. And so there's just like lots of different things that happen that she's embellished that put people in a not so great light. And so her story accidentally gets shared with the class bully, and he lets everyone know what she's been writing. And so everybody knows all the things that she's said about them, and everyone's mad at her. And so this is kind of her journey towards compassion because she has to realize that you can't just make things up about people, especially real people, to get that drama piece. And so it's her journey towards compassion. And she goes to this after school character club. So the character club that I taught is in all of the book series. So each character goes there. And so the fun thing is that the books overlap. Like there's little nuggets in each one. You're like, oh, wait, that happened in the other one, but you're seeing it from somebody else's perspective. So it's a lot of fun because the first four books go through the fall semester of school. It's the whole series will be one school year. And I have the fall semester done, and I'm currently working on the winter spring semester, but none of those are out yet.
Okay. All right. So as you mentioned, they sort of overlap, the books sort of overlap or kind of interconnect a bit. When you were writing them, did you have the plan for all four books in the say let's say the fall portion of the series planned out and you just then wrote each one in turn, or did you take it one at a time?
Good question. There's two kinds of writers. There's the planners, and then there's the pantsers, the people who write by the seat of their pants.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to be that person. So, yes, when I wrote the first book, I had never intended to write more. I just kind of wanted to have this gift to give these girls. But as I finished it and realized that, the rest of the series was just sitting there, I just had to find the characters and they were all already in Jeannie Blair's story. It was easy to go back and just pick someone and say, okay, which one of these kids could be struggling with this? And so Ethan is a soccer stud in Jeannie's story who he's struggling with integrity. We'll get to him in a little bit, but yeah, so all the characters are there. Like there's this one incident that happens in Jeannie's story that she writes about. And so in another story, you get to see who it happened to. And then in another story, you get to see who did it. And so that incident kind of carries through that semester. So that wasn't my original plan, but when I went back and was looking for things, I thought, oh, wow, this could actually tie through. So they all start and stem from Jeannie's story. But yeah, I kind of get to discover as I write what's going to happen too. And that's actually my most favorite thing as a writer too. As I'm sitting there on my computer writing a scene and then it takes a turn that I wasn't even expecting. So I love to have that discovery in my writing as well.
Well, let's talk about some of the others then. Maybe let's go into the second book. Talk about, after writing the first one, how you made that transition into book two and this really the start of the series.
Okay, so the second book that I wrote was not the second book that came out. I
Mm.
actually wrote the third book, Rachel Landon Feeling Abandoned, second. And when I wrote that story and beta tested it with some of the girls who had been in the character club, like the reaction that they had to it was not the one that I was expecting or going to. And when my husband read it, who's my first editor, he was like, I don't feel like this is a middle grade fiction. This feels more young adult. And so then I loved the story so much that I thought, well, maybe I can just, have a separate book and it won't be in the series. But as I thought more about that, like I didn't have a brand yet, and to try and have all these different series going on seemed a little scattered. And so we decided to put that book on hold, and I went back and found Ethan McGuire in her story, in Jeannie's story, and decided to just kind of play with his character. And so his character in Liar Liar, Ethan McGuire, he is afraid of heights. And the book opens with him the last day of summer at the top of a water slide at the local pool. And he's been dared by his younger sister, who is a firecracker, to go down this big slide. But he's afraid of heights. And so he's kind of hesitating up there and not knowing what to do. And as he's hesitating, a big kid kind of ends up like, hey, you're holding up the line, and pushes him through it. And he hits his eye on the side of, it's like a tube slide. And so when he comes out, he realizes his eye's bleeding. And then the kid doesn't wait for him to clear out and pushes him under the water again. And so there's like kind of this big incident where he doesn't know what's going on. And then his little sister sees it and she jumps in and hits the bully. She knees him in the mouth, and he's got a bloody lip now. So the lifeguard sends them all to the office and they're like, you guys got to go. And so the next day, he ends up with a bloody eye on the first day of school, or a black eye on the first day of school. And his friends are all like, what happened? And he's not going to say, oh, well, I was too scared to go down the slide and my sister stood up for me. And so he kind of makes up the story where he was protecting his sister, and it becomes this story, and it kind of grows, and it's out of his control. And everybody thinks he's like this big tough guy. And then he realizes that the bully who had pushed him down the slide is actually at his school. So then he has this fear that this bully is going to find out this story. And so he's like hiding, and it's just him dealing with all the effects from telling a lie, and how that starts to affect him. Like he starts having dreams and nightmares and just sick to his stomach. And then he actually starts believing the story. And then somebody's like, wait, that's not how it happened, when a family member confronts him later. And it's just like this hilarious tale of what can happen when we get caught in a web of lies. So that's the second story. And I think it's a lot of fun.
Well, you mentioned there are two more in the series. So let's talk about those. So the third one then deals with Rachel Landon, right? So you
Yes.
came back to her story, but in a
I
different way.
did. Yes, I took the original story and I pulled it into two separate stories, and all those things that were more young adult, I'm saving for maybe another character someday. But right now, Rachel, her mom is out of the picture. And I won't say why. You have to read the story to find out. But she's living alone with a single dad who he's going through his own struggles. And so she's kind of left to figure things out on her own. And then there's a social media incident where she's targeted and humiliated, and her friend group has kind of abandoned her, and her best friend, with a misunderstanding, isn't talking to her. And so she truly just feels abandoned and alone. And so it's her journey towards forgiveness for the things that have happened, and there are many. But again, she goes to this after school character club where Mrs. Keller, who is the teacher of this character club in all four of the books, takes her under her wing, realizing that she doesn't have a mom. She makes like a oops in the beginning and makes a comment about her mom, not realizing that her mom is not in the picture. And so kind of after that, kind of takes her under her wing, and it takes the metaphor of nature and flowers and ties it to forgiveness. And so I feel like there's a lot of really powerful hands-on actually activities that people can use if they're struggling with loneliness, unforgiveness, all of these things. And I actually do the lessons that are in the character club story at a real live character club. And so kids get to actually experience what's happening in the book. And that's a super lot of fun.
Well, let's talk about then book four, which rounds out the fall semester of
Yes.
the year. And you actually deal with some holidays even in this one.
Yes. Yes, we do. So Peter O'Toole's story, it actually starts with, I'm going to just call it the worm incident because in Jeannie Blair's story, she witnesses Peter, who's the main character in Peter O'Toole Bugged and Bullied, throw a worm on Rachel from Rachel Landon feeling abandoned. And she makes up her own version of what was actually going on. And that's in her story that she writes. But Rachel has to experience like that whole like this kid just threw worms on me, and that's kind of the start of her journey needing to forgive people. But Peter is actually the one who threw the worm, and so that happens in September, and then he's moving through and you get his backstory about why he's not a very nice boy. He has a menacing mom who's just awful to him. His dad's been in and out of jail and he's been cyberbullied as well. So he just has a lot going on in his background. So his journey is towards respect, and not just respect of other people, like, hey, let's not throw worms on people, but also like you have to respect yourself and knowing that you are worth more than sometimes what you feel. And so his story is just about you matter, you are important to people, whether you feel like you are or not. And so there's some things that happen over Halloween, and then Thanksgiving, he discovers some things about his dad. And then it ends right before Christmas. The character club, in each story, they go and they do like a service project. So in Jeannie Blair's story, they're collecting items to send over to people in the military overseas. In Liar Liar, Ethan McGuire, they clean up trash on a sledding hill. In Rachel Landon Feeling Abandoned, they take a care package to the police department and get a tour of the police department. And then in Peter O'Toole, they do a talent show for a local old folks home. And so when that's happening, there's like that's kind of the culmination of the story. Something happens there and he takes off and gets lost in a snowstorm. It's just following his journey to self-respect in that incident. So yeah, it does kind of cover all the fall holidays.
Well, in these books, I'm curious what comes first for you? Is it the lesson that you want to impart, the virtue you want kids to learn or to see maybe in a different light, or is it the characters and the story, and then you pick whatever lesson or virtue works best with?
Actually, yeah, it's the virtue first
Okay.
because the curriculum that I was using to teach the character club has 8 virtues. And so I know what the virtue for the book is going to be. And so now that I have the characters, I kind of look through the books that I have and I'm thinking, okay, which character could potentially be struggling with this thing? And yeah, the next book is actually responsibility. And it's funny because whenever I'm looking for examples or focusing on that specific virtue, it always hits me really hard. Like Jeannie's story is on compassion. And when I was writing that, we had a person in our life who was super, super difficult and very needy. And I didn't really want to help them. So I was a little bit of Jeannie there and didn't like fought that compassion piece. And my husband, he wanted to take this person dinner one night and he's like, he's really hurting, we need to stop by. And I was like, oh, I just don't want to. And I was so frustrated. And so that actually turned into a chapter in Jeannie Blair's story. So a lot of times the things that I'm struggling with end up being what the kid in the story is struggling with, because a lot of it's, each author is a little bit in every character they write. And so making them all feel different, because yes, I've gone through all of these things. So right now I'm working on responsibility, and it's interesting the things that come up when I'm researching that or just living that.
So really, the books aren't just for kids. I mean, these are lessons we learn and keep learning over and over again.
Absolutely. Yes, I say they're for ages 8 and up, but they make amazing family read alouds. I'm speaking at two homeschool conventions coming up and teaching the character club to the kids. And I know that families really enjoy reading them all together because, yes, there are things that anyone at any age can pick up.
And so you mentioned that there were eight in the original curriculum that you had. So I'm assuming the remaining four are going to be covered in the spring semester books.
Yes, that is the
Okay,
goal.
good. Okay. So what happens then when the series is done? Do you have other goals, other books that you want to write? And are they similar to what you've done already, or do you have other genres, other types of stories?
Wow, Stacey, you're going way down the line there, way future. But yes, actually, so these 8 virtues, I mean, I ask at schools when I speak all the time, like, what virtues would you like me to cover? And so I have a list. This series is the first year, and it's meant to go through one school year and cover these 8 traits. But yes, I there is the option to write a second year. I also have one book that's a spin-off of the series. It's called the Character Club Little Sibs series because Jeannie Blair in the first book, she has 3 younger brothers who are triplets. And as I was writing their story in hers, because that's part of her journey towards compassion, she has these 3 younger brothers that drive her crazy. They just had so much personality. I'm like, these guys deserve their own stories too. So I do have Jeannie Blair's her the oldest triplet, who's only older by a couple of minutes, but his name is Benjamin Blair. And so it's called Benjamin Blair and the Case of the Missing Noun Hound. And it's his story, and it's like a mini journey towards patience. And it's about his teacher loses her favorite like teaching puppet. His name is Ned the Noun Hound. And so it goes through this mystery where they're trying to find what happened to her Ned the Noun Hound, and all of the clues are actually teaching the standards for nouns in kindergarten, first and second grade. So it's written more on a first, second grade level, and it has like definitions to the words in it, but it also covers all the things that teachers need to teach for nouns. Because as I said, I was a teacher. I still am a teacher for a lot of years. So I like to get those little teaching lessons in there too. Because when I was teaching, I would notice that if I was just doing some like drill practice with whatever it was, like let's say parts of speech, kids would just be rolling their eyes. But if I found that example in a story that we were reading, like during our read aloud, kids would be like, oh, that's that. And then it would just come to life. And so I try and plug in little mini lessons in all of my books. Like in Jeannie Blair, there's a lesson on metaphors and similes. And Rachel Landon actually has a little math lesson. So there's just all these fun little examples of things that teachers would love, because even though kids read these, my original idea was that teachers would use these books to kind of further what they're trying to cover in the classroom. And it's just kind of a fun way to tie it all together. And so I feel like I just went off on a rabbit trail there, but yeah.
Good. Okay. And so the Little Sibs series, 3 books for that?
There will be 5 when it's all finished, but I
Okay.
only have the first one right now.
Okay. What has been the reaction to the books from either kids who have read them or parents or teachers? I mean, what's the feedback you're getting?
It's been amazing. I have always been under the idea that my books don't have to be read by everyone in the world, but if I can just reach one kid, if I can make a difference for one person, that is why I'm doing this. And so when I was doing an author visit for Liar Liar Ethan McGuire, it has been in our district's Battle of the Books competition, which I don't know if you know about that, but I was visiting schools as a result, and a boy said, I really liked that book. Yeah, I read it when I was still a liar. I was like, wait, what? What do you mean by that? And he's like, well, I used to sneak down and take food after my parents would go to bed because I was always hungry. But they said that I couldn't eat anything after a certain time. And so I would always sneak down, and after I was reading that, I felt guilty about it. So I talked to them and I told them that I'd been stealing food. And they said, well, hey, how about we get you a snack before bed? And like they were able to talk through it and work through it. And like to me, like that was enough right there. I'm like, wow, this book was for you. And the same thing happened with Rachel Landon feeling abandoned. I had a girl whose home life was really, really rough, and she hadn't seen her mom in a really long time. And she said, you know what? Because of this, I'm going to send a letter to my mom because I know she's not going to be the first one to reach out. And I'm just going to tell her that I forgive her. And I was just blown away. I'm like, wow, this book was written for you. Like
Right,
nobody
right,
else has to read it. So, yeah,
right. Made it all worthwhile.
for sure, for sure.
You mentioned that you wanted to be a writer at least starting in third grade when you
Yeah.
set up your first writing club.
Hmm.
What were the kinds of books you were reading as a kid?
Oh my goodness. Wow. I have not thought about that in a really long time. Um, I read there was a book series called Mandy, and they were mysteries. And I think the first one was called Mandy and the Secret Tunnel. And I know I read just about every book of those. Yeah, I really liked mysteries. As I got older, Lois Duncan was a favorite. And now I run our district's Battle of the Book competition. So I'm always looking for great middle grade fiction books. And my favorite author right now is Jennifer Nielsen. She writes historical fiction for the middle grades, and she just did one on the Titanic. And she's really good at the suspense piece. And I absolutely love her book. So, yeah, I guess I've always been a little bit of a mystery. My books are more realistic fiction, except for that one mystery about Jeannie Blair's younger brothers. But yeah.
Would these have been books that you would have voluntarily picked up and read as a kid? And if not, do you think there were books that you probably should have read as a kid?
Like my books, you mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I would have totally read this because I think I was drawn to people who were like me.
Hmm.
I am not a fantasy reader. Like my daughter actually writes fantasy stories, and it's a struggle because that's just not my genre. I have a hard time getting through them. Even Harry Potter, I really struggled with, and I know everybody loves it, but fantasy is not my genre. So realistic fiction, like kids that I can relate to, like, oh, that sounds like me. That's why these books are just totally relatable. Like nobody has like this crazy, amazing talent. They're just regular kids living regular life, going through things regular kids go through. And I feel like kids can just meet their next best friend as they read these stories. And so they could just feel like, hey, this is just the kid sitting next to me in school. And so, yes, I feel like every kid needs to read them, of course.
What has this writing journey been like for you in comparison to what you thought it might be, what your 8-year-old self imagined it to be when you set up that writing club? So, did you think then that you would end up being a writer, that you'd have these books? And did it turn out at all the way you thought?
That's a really big, deep question. I'm not totally sure what my 8-year-old self envisioned, like if I was going to be some famous author. I know that when I was in eighth grade, I did call Lois Duncan up on the phone and I interviewed her because we were supposed to interview somebody who was in the field that we wanted to be in when we grew up. And I remember all my friends were like, oh, way to go. Why don't you just like become president next year or something? Because they just thought that was crazy that I would just call like a famous author, but she answered and I had an interview with her. It was amazing. And I'm so sad that she's passed because I would love to be able to go back and tell her, like, hey, I've published books now too. And so I don't know if I had like delusions of grandeur that I was going to be some famous author like Lois Duncan. I don't know if you even know that name,
Hmm.
but it's different. I feel very thankful that I was able to do this and that I have these books. And when I go into a library and see them on the shelf and I have some real estate there, it feels really fulfilling. And I'm very happy for that. But I'm also enjoying my part-time teaching gig where I get to be creative and I actually get to go through these books with kids and hear their reactions to my characters. So it's like a completely different kind of fulfilling than I would have expected. As a kid, you probably think, oh, I want to do interviews on Oprah or, with Barbara Walters or whoever. And then you grow up and you realize maybe that's actually not what I want.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's different, but it's good.
Well, if people want to learn more about you and the books and look for new releases when they start coming out, where can they go to find you and that information?
The best place would be my website, which is characterclubonline.com. So it's www.characterclubonline.com. And I think that should all be pretty clear to spell. Yeah, just characterclubonline.com.
Good. And if people want to purchase a copy of one or all of the books, where can they go to buy them?
Yes, that would be the great place. As soon as you get to the website, all the books are there at the top, and you can click on each one to get to know each character a little bit better. And then it takes you to the link on Amazon, and you can grab it there. Or there's even a personal email link. You can reach out to me and purchase it that way as well if you'd rather.
Wonderful. Well, Allie, I want to thank you very much for joining me today on the podcast. And I want to wish you luck with the Character Club series, the 4 books that are out, and the ones to be coming out soon for the rest of the series, and also the Little Sib series. We will look forward to all of that when you have that ready. And so congratulations on everything you've accomplished so far, and best of luck with the rest of your writing journey.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
The Bookshop at the End of the Internet is a podcast dedicated to helping book lovers discover new authors. Like any good bookshop, this podcast features a wide variety of books by the equally varied and interesting authors who felt compelled to write them. This podcast gives you a chance to meet these wonderful writers and discover your next must-read book. Listen to the authors describe their books and tell you their stories in their own words. My interviews feature books from all genres and authors from all walks of life, including those who are indie published as well as those published by small presses and large publishing houses. Looking for unique, not so easy to find books for yourself, a friend, or a book club? Tune into this podcast and find your newest favorite author or maybe a soon-to-be bestseller. This podcast, like all the best bookshops, is filled with all kinds of books and all kinds of authors. Tune in, browse around, find a new author, and discover a new favorite book. You never know what treasures you might find in the Bookshop at the End of the Internet.